We begin with the south facade of the church, which faced the palace, contained the main entrance to the church, and was also the location of the entrance to the royal gallery. It is not surprising then to find that the main figural register of this facade contains a strong royal message. For example, there is no particular reason why the representations of Christ, seen here, and of the Mother of God, seen here, and child should be enthroned. This is correctly seen as part of the royal nature of this facade. And these royal concerns are also clearly expressed in the selection of the other figures on this facade. With the exception of Christ and the Mother of God, all of the scenes of the main figural register depict a ruler or leader who successfully withstood trials imposed by God. We begin at the far left, which is carved with scenes illustrating the story of Jonah. He is first shown being tossed by his shipmates into the open mouth of the whale that waits below, floating on its back. Here we go. The prophet is naked with bushy hair and a beard, and the whale has the head of a bear, the body of a fish, and a finny tail. Jonah appears again to the right, resting atop a pomegranate tree, following his expulsion from the beast, which is now depicted as a cinmerve, a fantastic composite animal. Jonah is still naked, but now he is also bald, reflecting a detail from an apocryphal account that attests to the depilatory properties of the whale's digestive system. Jonah's story continues in the register above, where he is shown warning the king of Nineveh of the destruction of the city. The city's inhabitants, depicted in 4 roundels, display various gestures of dismay. The next figural group depicts Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son Isaac, and here you're going to have to take my word for this, as it is in the niche right behind here and is virtually impossible to photograph. So visualize this, if you will. The scene illustrates the moment when the ram appeared in the tree, arresting Abraham's downward plunge of the knife, which is raised above his head. Above the ram, the hand of God emerges as if from the heavens, tucked into the corner of the projection of the apse. The image of Moses, whom we can just see here, is next. The Old Testament figure is shown with bare feet, carrying in his raised hands the covered tables of the law. On the opposite side of an intervening window is carved, as we have seen, an angel, the enthroned Christ, the archangel Gabriel, the enthroned mother and child, and the archangel Michael. The section of the facade that follows contains the central doorway and the entrance into the royal gallery, but it is now obscured by a late 18th century bell tower. To the immediate right of the bell tower, carved on a northeastern apse, are the images of Saints Sahak and Hametzasp. Sahak and Hametzasp were brothers and princes of the Artzruni family who were martyred by the Arabs in 783 for refusing to renounce their faith and were subsequently canonized by the Armenian Church. The inscriptions that accompany the 2 princes are the lengthiest on the church and stress the princes' martyrdom rather than their noble status. Their martyrdom is also emphasized by the prominent martyr's cross carried by Hametzasp, the elder brother, seen here. Sahak, the younger prince, wears a decorated robe secured at the waist with a tabbed belt worn over trousers. And this costume, here's the tabbed belt, the tabs hanging down. This costume is similar to that worn by Gagik's princely attendants on the east facade, and its decoration of concentric linked circles replicates the decoration of Gagik's tunic in the west facade portrait. Sahak gestures with both hands to his elder brother, who is even more magnificently dressed in a kaftan carved with a pattern of deeply cut interlinking X's, also worn over trousers. The final scene on the south facade visually narrates the battle of David and Goliath. It begins with a depiction of Saul, the king of Israel, whose royal status is indicated by his robe and his turban. Saul is offering advice to David, who moves forward towards the giant. Goliath is carved to the far right, near to the edge of the facade, and is appropriately the largest figure on the Palatine Church. Taken together, Jonah, the king of Nineveh, Abraham, Moses, and David all serve as models of repentant and pious rulership with whom Gagik could be favorably compared. Jonah at first fled from his mission before submitting to God's will in the belly of the whale. The king of Nineveh led his country back to righteousness by heeding the warnings of Jonah. Abraham successfully underwent his test of faith. Moses rescued his people from captivity and from idolatry. David defended his people in battle, overcoming Goliath and becoming king. He also overcame the enmity of Saul, whose presence on the facade should be seen as a figuration of bad rulership. If taken as a group, these figures represent the spiritual ancestry of the king Gagik-Artzruni. His genealogical ancestry is represented by the saints Sahak and Hamatzasp, and their placement directly adjacent to the entrance into the royal gallery underscores their connection with the king. The presence of these Artzrunic saints, who sacrificed their lives in the struggle against unbelievers and who were rewarded after death, imply Gagik's willingness to make the same sacrifice. We move from the east facade to the figural register of the north facade, which features 12 biblical figures presented alone or in narrative groups. The north facade is almost impossible to capture in an entire photograph, so I use here a sketch taken from Der Necessian. Beginning on the far left, the first scene depicts Samson killing the Philistine, a presentation which emphasizes Samson's role as liberator of the faithful. Next is the figure of a saint who is unidentified, but for the scroll that marks him as a prophet. Next is Ezekiel, who warned of the rule of evil princes and prophesied the captivity of Israel. And he is followed by Hezekiah, king of Judah, whose status is conveyed by his royal robe and turban. Hezekiah is an Old Testament paradigm of pious rulership, revered for his abolition of idolatry. And he is linked in biblical narrative with the prophet Isaiah, who is shown next on the facade. When Hezekiah was threatened by the Assyrian army, it was Isaiah's presence that called down God's wrath, destroying the enemy before it attacked. Taken together, the figural sculptures of the eastern flank of the north facade illustrate the triumphs of the faithful made possible by divine assistance, emphasizing the victories over non-believers. Samson and Hezekiah in particular provide forceful parallels for the reformed nature of Gagik's kingship. The projection of the east apse of the north facade features representations of the temptation and fall, and I'm showing you here again a photograph taken in the early 20th century. The narrative proceeds from the right-hand side of the apse and the scene of Eve's temptation. Here's Eve kneeling while the serpent is tempting, to the depiction of the fall, carved to the left. This, to Western eyes, reversal of the narrative direction reflects the Syriac tradition and is an element of Armenian art that recurs throughout the medieval period.